Every year I do like as close to fantasy videos as I can get, which is talking about just the math of who is consistent, who maybe scored too much, who maybe is ready for a bounce back. And thankfully, yesterday with the pool guide arriving, I've got the numbers to look at this year and say, hey, so there's some interesting players in terms of consistency. And this means overall consistency of points per game. So when you're putting together a fantasy team, you want to know what you're getting. And these are guys who will give you that certainty. And it has to be the last 3 years. So if a player's had 2 great years, but the third year before that wasn't very good, or if they've only been in the league for 2 years, they will not be on the list. Now, I want to throw an honorable mention towards Draisaitl. Draisaitl, the first year, so I'll throw this one up here. Draisaitl's varied from 0.90 to 1.55, which is a 0.65 difference, but that's from 0.90 2 years ago to 1.55 this year. And so he doesn't qualify for either of the lists I've got going here because I had to have a cutoff, and if I didn't have the cutoff before 0.90, there would have been just a lot. There would have been a lot on this board. So, all right. The way this is going to work, there's 15 players for each side here, and then there's 2 up here. So on this side, okay, so we'll start with number 17, and then I'll explain this for everybody. We've got Kreider, who over the last 3 years has varied between 0.64 points per game and 0.71, which is a difference of 0.07. And that's the cutoff. There were a couple others that had 0.07 as the differential, but they scored fewer points. Now, on this side, so we're going to have just the overall and then the PPG players, the points per game players. So your star players. Because when I did this last year, people were like, what about this guy? What about that guy? So, okay, we'll do star players as well. And in order to get that, you have to be a point per game player. And I made it 0.94 and up. There were a couple that were 0.92, and I'm like, but if I'd allowed that, then it would have just been a mess. So, the most consistent at 17th overall Pastrnak was from 0.98 to 1.36, which is a 0.38 points per game difference. This is why I'm doing both this time, because obviously you're going to have a bigger differential here. So people would say, well, I want Pastrnak in there. So, all right, we'll do the points per game players and the others. And the reason 1 and 2 are over here is because it's the same 2 players. The same 2 players on both lists. That's how impressive it is. Number 16. Brady Shea. Brady Shea has a variance of 0.30 to 0.36 over the last 3 years, which is a 0.06 differential. You know what you're getting with Brady Shea. Not a guy you take in the first round, but, you take him in the later round. Number 16, Artemi Panarin, whose variance is 1.01 points per game to 1.38, or a difference of 0.37. See? Easy peasy. We got it, right? Okay. Number 15 on this side is going to be Pulock, 0.45 to 0.51, difference of 0.06. So when I was looking at this, I said, you know what? If you score more points per game, but the differential is the same, I'll put them higher. You can count on more points from Pulock than you can from Shea. Pretty basic. Number 15 on the points per game side of things is Kucherov, who of course had a fantastic season in 2018-2019. But what's interesting with him is how remarkably consistent he was the other 2 seasons. Both the season we finished, 2019-2020, and 2017-2018, he scored 1.25 points per game. 1.56 in that 128-point season. But, 0.31 differential. He's a guy you want if you're drafting. So this is why I've got both sides of the board. Number 14 in the overalls, Nate Schmidt. I shouldn't be surprised that Schmidt's on this board, but I think the 0.47 to 0.53, the fact that he does score a little bit more than Pulock, not a lot. Points per game wise, he's just that little bit ahead of Pulock, so he ends up getting 14th on the board. 14th for the points per game players. Wide variance, Malkin, 1.06 to 1.35, or a difference of 0.29. And again, once you're into the points per game range, once you're up to 1.00 points per game, it's really easy for that variation to get kind of crazy. So 0.29 is decent, again, once you get into that level. Number 13. This will make Devils fans happy, I think, to see Nico Hischier on the board. But I don't think he's on this board next year. I think Nico Hischier is due for a bit of a breakthrough next year. So Hischier, 0.62 to 0.68. That's a 0.06 difference. Very reasonable, very consistent. Number 13 on the other side of the board is Barkov, who had a down year this year. Barkov definitely had a down year this year. 0.94 to 1.17. Which is a differential of 0.23. So consistent, but I think he'd rather be 1.17 rather than 0.94 points per game. I mean, who wouldn't, right? I'm sure Jordy Ben would come into Vancouver and go, I'd like to be 1.17 points per game. I'd like to score more than a point a game. And I'm sure Travis Green would go, just get on the ice. Number 12. Evander Kane. And both guys named Kane end up on this board. Evander Kane, 0.69 to 0.75, a difference of 0.06. Remarkably consistent, and again, scores more points per game than the other guys below him, so he gets a higher ranking. Number 12 on the points per game, guys, is Rantanen. And it's interesting, too, because I do hear the complaints like, well, Rantanen's okay, he's overrated. I can't get there. Rantanen, the difference is from 0.98 to 1.18, a differential of 0.2. So I've got the number on a board down here that I'm using for the board over here. It's very technical. Number 11, it's not. Hedman, whose differential is 0.77 to 0.83, or 0.06 difference. These are the guys that, if you're in and what would be interesting would be if you had a pool where you could get a majority of these guys and just see if that balances out. You go, yep, this is exactly how many points they should have. So at the start of the year, you balance all this out and you go, all right, this is how many they should score over the season. And then at the end, you look at it and go, yeah, that's what they should get. That is actually a very interesting idea. I don't know where I would put that list or whether anybody would care at the end of the season, but it would be interesting. Number 11, Mcdavid. But there is a thing with Mcdavid. His level starts at 1.32 and goes to 1.52. So, yeah, it's a 0.2 points per game difference. But he starts off at a really high bar of 1.32. You're going to get at least that many points per game out of him. That's a pretty good number. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say coaches are happy if he's like, I only got 1.3 points per game this year. I think Ken Holland's going to be like, you're good. Don't worry about it. Number 10. So now we're into where the number's going to change a bit here. 0.51 to 0.56, meaning it's a 0.05 difference for Jeff Petrie over the last 3 seasons. So Petrie, remarkably consistent for the Montreal Canadiens. Very good defenseman. Overall, his numbers are fantastic. So yeah, Petrie ends up at 10th. So his points per game are a little better than Schmidt, a little better than Pulock, and it's consistent over the last 3 years. Number 10 on the other side of the board is Eichel. So if you've been like, I want to see Eichel listed ahead of arguably the best player in the league, there you go. From 0.96 to 1.15, or a difference of 0.19. So that's the difference between Eichel's best and worst seasons of the last 3 years. That's a pretty consistent total from Jack Eichel. So, yeah, 0.19, top 10. And it's, again, with McDavid, it's not like that difference is going to mean that you don't take him first in your pool, right? It may give you a little bit of pause with Draisaitl just because it's so far above everybody. And it's so far above where he was the year before. And yet, would we be surprised if he stays at around 1.5 points per game? No. Would we be surprised if McDavid did it as well? Not really, no. Number 9. And again, 0.05 is going to be the difference here. Krug. Torrey Krug from 0.78 to 0.83, a 0.05 difference. And Krug is an offensive defenseman, and he puts up a lot of points on the power play. So for St. Louis, he should be a huge add for them on their power play this coming season, and he'll be missed in Boston for that as well. Number 9 on the other side of the board is Crosby. So last year, when I didn't have Crosby on the list, people were like, well, this list is invalid because you don't have Crosby on it. And this is just about scoring. Crosby's consistent in being one of the best players in the game. His points totals do fluctuate from 1.09 points per game to 1.27, a difference of 0.18. So in the points per game side of things, he's 9th. But if you look at that 0.18, it is way less reliable than Kreider, even though you do take him ahead of Kreider. This was never about, well, take these guys on your, this should be your, don't take this is your team over this, or you're losing your hockey pool. And don't, Shannon said I should pick Kreider over Crosby. I never said that. It's not a thing. Number 8. Number 8 is, there he is. All right, number 8 from the Caps. Backstrom of the Capitals, who is remarkably consistent, of 0.05 difference between 0.88 and 0.93. So for Caps fans who argue that Backstrom's consistent, yeah, the numbers back that up. Number 8 on the other side of the board, remarkably consistent, is McKinnon. 1.25, that was his 99-point season, to 1.56. A difference of, not 1.56, where am I at here? 1.21, reading the wrong column. Bad hockey guy. 1.21, 1.56 maybe a little bit higher than he's been, to 1.35. So there you go. When you're watching a commercial now of McKinnon and Crosby, you can yell at the screen, McKinnon's more consistent than Crosby. So the 1.35 is impressive. McKinnon's going to get a 100-point season. It's just a matter of the NHL allowing him to do it. He has to have an 82-game schedule to get it, and he has to stay healthy for the full 82. But it's going to happen. And so for McKinnon, 0.14, remarkably consistent. Number 7. I'm almost up to the tie, so I'm keeping an eye on that. Because there is a tie on this board. Orlov. So Orlov is one of those ones that people might be surprised by. 0.35 to 0.39. You know exactly how many points per game you're getting from Orlov. 0.04 difference. Remarkably consistent. Number 7 on the points per game side of things. And this is where we have a tie on this side. So I'm going to do 2 on this side. Because it's the exact same number. From 0.95 to 1.07. A difference of 0.12 points per game for Tavares. And then also, so these guys are tied at basically 6th place. Mark Stone. Now, of course, the difference with Stone is that if you have a league that keeps track of all the other advanced stats and the defensive stats, Stone will have more value than Tavares. And while I was putting this all together, I thought, is there a hockey pool somewhere where they all yell at each other about who had more offensive zone starts and why the other guy's team sucks due to Corsi and Fenwick? And if so, can I watch that exchange? Because I think that would be hilarious. But anyways, yeah, so Stone and Tavares are equal on this board for this reason. But again, if we're looking at, Tavares is obviously going to take more faceoffs because he's the center, and Stone is one of the best two-way forwards in the game. Now, we have a tie on this side as well. So, I'll put McAvoy first here. Not that it matters. 0.48 to 0.52. 0.04 is the differential. And I want to say with McAvoy, I do think that there are some Bruins fans who overrate McAvoy a bit. I love Charlie Mack. I think he's great. But 0.52 points per game, he may end up getting up to 0.6 this year because of Krug's exit and him maybe getting more time in special teams. But I don't think he's going to have that explosive offense. And then one of the more interesting ones, too, on the board is Johansen. Is he going to be remarkably consistent as he has been the last 3 years? Minnesota clearly has intentions of having Johansen play more than he's played elsewhere. That could equal more points. It could equal more injuries, because with Johansen, you have to consider that as well, or Johansen. But yeah, 0.04 difference for him as well, from 0.48, 0.52. Very, very remarkably consistent. Number 5 on the points per game side of things is, Toronto fans will be happy about this, Austin Matthews, who varies not very much. 1.02 to 1.14. That is a difference of 0.12, which is the same difference as Stone and Tavares, but it's at a higher total. So you're going to get more points out of Matthews than you probably will out of Tavares. And if you're a Leafs fan, you're probably going, well, yeah, right. And this is one of the reasons why when people say, well, they're overrated, they're not. They're very remarkably consistent offensively. The Leafs as a team you can have the debate about. Matthews and Tavares, you really can't. They're very consistent players. I do get the feeling Matthews could have an explosive season points-wise, but maybe it'll be a goal-scoring explosion for him. Maybe the points aren't going to ever be exactly where you might think when you look at the amount of hype around the player. Number 4. This one kind of surprised me a bit. And that's Schmaltz, who is currently playing for Arizona. Difference of 0.63 to 0.67, 0.04 points per game difference. It's consistent. How many games does he play? I don't know. Is he injured? That's the big question mark. Number 4 on the points per game side of things. I don't have another tie, do I? Nope, it'd be this guy. Ovechkin. From 0.99, which was this year, to 1.10, or a difference of 0.11. Ovechkin hasn't got the memo that he's old yet. Hasn't got the memo that he's supposed to be past his prime. He's supposed to have stopped scoring by now. He is still scoring remarkably consistently. And again, this 0.11 is higher than the 0.07 put up by Kreider. This is why I didn't just do this video this year. I decided, you know what? We're going to put the whole thing into one big video. If we didn't have the same guys at 1 and 2 on both lists, I would have done 2 different videos. But here we are. Number 3. Number 3 is Palmieri out of New Jersey, 0.68 to 0.71. If you're a Devils fan and you like Palmieri, I agree. Palmieri's a very good player. Palmieri, you do kind of think he should be around the 0.8 or 0.85 mark in when you watch him play regularly, but he does tend to fall into that 0.68, 0.71, which is fine. That's a scoring number that's right near Evander Kane's. That's remarkable that Kane and Palmieri have about the same points per game over the last 3 years. And yet Kane we hear about all the time, and Palmieri, not as much. Number 3 on the points per game side of things. There's no question about Stamkos being a consistently good player. The question mark with Stamkos now is, so coming out of this injury that sidelined him for almost the entire playoffs, will he still be a 1.1 points per game player to 1.2, which is a difference of 0.1. That's obnoxious. It is obnoxiously consistent, but again, it's a matter of him getting back to full health. If he gets back to full health next season, yep, he'll be probably a 1.1 to 1.2 points per game type player. He could be very attractive if they decided to at some point make him available. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying if at some point they decide to do that. So number 2 on the list, and again, this is both lists have the same guys at 1 and 2. The same guys. I will talk about Mark Scheifele for as long as I have to, until people realize how elite his level of scoring is and how remarkably consistent it is. From 1.00 exactly to 1.03, a difference of 0.03. He will score you roughly a point a game every single year. He has done this for years. He led the list. I think he was number 1 on the list last year. He is so remarkably consistent. And the fact that he does this at that higher level of scoring is nothing short of remarkable. And doing this on a Winnipeg team that no matter how good or how iffy they are, he is still scoring a point a game. It is absolutely reliable. He is your points per game guy. But number 1 on the list, this isn't going to make people happy. Over the last 3 years, Brad Marchand leads the list with a difference of 1.24 to 1.27. So he gets the nod over Scheifele because he's scoring at a higher rate per game. It is remarkable that you have Marchand here, you have Pastrnak down here. Bergeron didn't qualify. Bergeron this year, his points per game dropped to a level that he did not qualify for the 0.94 plus needed to get onto the board. But it's remarkable that Marchand and Scheifele are that consistent every year. And this is why, as much as people hate Marchand, and I know people do, they can't stand Marchand. You mention his name, people go nuts. He is a very consistent, solid offensive player for Boston, which is why I get so ticked off when he does something offside that just, something that's aggravating. If he's aggravated you with a dirty hit, if he's aggravated you by licking people, I've been just as aggravated as you are. Trust me, because I know how good he can be. I know how good offensively he is. I know how solid a penalty killer he is. I know how strong he is on the puck, that he plays like he's a foot taller than he is. But I also know he does cross the line. He did not do it as much this year as in other years. This year was a pretty clean season. I think what hurts Marchand too is Jack Edwards. If I had a dime for every time Jack Edwards talked about how, that wouldn't have been a penalty if it wasn't Marchand. And I'm like, dude, that's a penalty. Just knock it off. That does make it worse. So my honest opinion is, if you watch a Marchand game / Boston game, maybe don't watch it on NESN if you can avoid it. And I hate to say that because I do think NESN provides some solid coverage. I think Sofia Yurtskevich is a fantastic reporter, and she's great behind the benches talking to the players in between periods and whatnot. And I like Andy Brickley. I think Brickley's fun to listen to. His accent's awesome. But yeah, Jack Edwards can make it unbearable at times. And when you combine that with Marchand, I think there's a lot of reasons that people hate Boston, and I get it. I do. I get it. I've never questioned it. I've never said, I don't understand why people hate Boston. I get it. Makes sense to me. But he is the most consistent points producer in the National Hockey League. And you look at that 1.24 to 1.27, it is the highest on the board behind McDavid, a 0.01 behind Kucherov as your low point. It is ahead of McKinnon. The 1.27 is on par with Crosby as the high point. That's some elite level scoring. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video, and hey, I expanded it this year. This way, when people say you're wrong, where's this guy? And I have to answer, this is math. This is just math. And if they're not on the board, they had a down year, or they had an up year, or something that meant that their consistency number wasn't as high. There you go. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.